Record. Okay, I'll kick us off. I'm going to moderate this today. I have a HR talent acquisition background, and I've been so fortunate to meet Emily and now through Emily Myrna. And Squirrel Space is an amazing organization that is it's in a startup space, and there's a lot of offerings and services. And as a part of the growth and development, connecting with this group of people is really important. And so I'm going to moderate this discussion, but truly lean on Emily and Mirna to go through the slides and talk through everything. But at the end of the day, this is for everyone to be engaged and ask questions. And so I'm going to help read any questions that come through and ask for more details if I feel like from my perspective with the HR background, we could go deeper into something where the details are at the end of the day, this is really surface level in many ways because we're just trying to understand what you guys as HR leadership and ERG leaders and people that are really ambassadors for this in your organization want to know. And if there's anything that we can be more clear and specific on, please ask questions. But for the most part, I think the content is amazing. And Emily and Mirna are really great. So let's get through all of the stuff that they have and maybe save most questions for the end. I don't know if Emily and Myrna, you want to introduce yourselves to start?
Okay, go ahead, Emily.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm not sure if who's in here, but hi to everyone. I'm Emily Kapsikevich. I'm the founder of Squirrel Space. And Squirrel Space is something that's really special to me as I really started it to help create more awareness and support for people who are neurodiverse because of a lot of my lived experience. I've often struggled in a corporate workplace to hope it doesn't happen to other people or use my experience to help shine a light on ways that we can improve things. And so this is it's a webinar that we designed to help both get feedback from HR and ERG leaders and other people in the diversity and inclusion space, because we want to help make things better in the workplace. And we understand that we have to work within organizations and figure out how to package and present the information and data that we have in a way that motivates an organization to take better care of employees, creating accommodating workplaces. So we're excited for this webinar. Thank you for attending, and I'll turn it to Mirna to also introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. And again, apologies for the multiple tech difficulties, but we are live and this is what happens. I'm Myrna Mejia. I've been a psychologist for over 20 years, and I'm also a certified professional coach. My role here in Squirrel Space, I am the Chief Coaching and Culture Officer, and I'm happy to be here. All right, so let's get the party started.
So today we'll be using a couple of ways to information, but we have a self-audit tool in Claude, which we sent out prior to the webinar, but chat. Claude is a great AI tool. And so what we've done is put some organizational design questions in here that come from a self-audit tool from the book, The Canary Code. If you could take a few minutes now to go into the Claude tool and just answer the questions that we have, and it's really meant about your organization. And if you're not working for an organization currently, you could just generate really is how our organization's performing. So please complete as much as you can in the next 5 minutes for Claude. And then if you already did that, you can hop over to our Miro board. And Miro is an online collaboration to sign up after following that link to look at the board that I've created, which has a journey map of a typical emotions, the opportunities to address some of those pain points. And it really just helps build empathy and understanding to these tools as we'll be using them and referencing them for the remainder of the webinar. Okay, it seems like most people have completed it already. Feel free to continue completing it while with the content, but I think it sounds like why don't we make sure people can get over to the mural board. So we have a pretty full agenda. We're gonna Neurodiversity 101. We'll do very brief introductions. We'll do a brief debrief of the self audit tool, and then we'll start deep diving into the exciting part, which is the design part. And we'll spend some time doing a workshop using the mural board, and then we'll talk about our insights, and then we'll wrap up. Any questions about the agenda? I think we're ready to get going. Okay, so the purpose of this was really to help us understand the HR and culture landscapes within organizations. And we're really trying to speak with people who are the champions in organizations because the urgency of inclusion has only increased with AI and then unemployment issues. And so there's just a lot more research emerging about the impact of workplace well being. And we know this really affects the neurodivergent community, and so this is really to help identify those gaps and help to design around them in a way that's more preventive rather than trying to always manage things after they've happened. Is this is a principle. So we're going to cover the topics of neurodivergence. We'll talk about some of the common places where organizations have a breakdown in process. And then we'll talk about accommodation versus inclusive design, as this is really about proactive design and universal basic design in order to design for the greatest needs, but that benefits everyone. So, where breakdowns often occur, and this is why we've laid out the journey map for neurodiverse employees, is HR breakdowns often happen in the hiring process, and that's where a lot of the attention is. But onboarding and continuing for time really don't fit in, or they don't know how to fit in, and they're just trying to understand an organization. And that's where those first impressions and the expectations, and a lot of times you get your culture cues from onboarding. And then the way that management and performance is continuously incentivized, rewarded, given feedback really determines whether someone's going to stay in an organization. And so this is a broader approach to understanding inclusive design, because we're not just concerned about hiring as solving pain points. Now we're looking at the overall problem.
Okay. All right, so let's talk a little bit about what neurodiversity is. So, obviously, we could spend days just talking about this concept, but what neurodivergence means is a natural variation in how our brain works. Neurodiversity is really an umbrella concept. It includes many different experiences, including neurodevelopmental conditions such as attention deficit hyperactivity disorder or autism spectrum disorder. So those are neurodevelopmental. And then there's this other bucket where it's called acquired neurodivergence, which includes traumatic brain injuries, post traumatic stress disorder, bipolar, and so forth. So, really, when we think of neurodivergence and neurodiversity, is really capturing a lot of different experiences and conditions that impact just how we receive and process information. When you really think about this huge umbrella concept, it's pretty clear that it is present in absolutely every workplace environment, regardless of departments. When we think about neurodiversity, we're really talking about both from a strengths perspective. Let's understand it because there are strengths even in how we process information differently, but also understanding because our brains are so unique, processing information quite differently. It also means that not every workplace environment is going to fit everyone to address their specific needs. So, again, we're talking about a strength and support perspective. What neurodivergence isn't, it's not a trend or a buzzword or a DEI checkbox. We have seen because of social media, there's a lot of information out there, but unfortunately, it's also contributed to a lot of people just claiming, right? Oh my God, my brain is so ADHD, or I'm so on the spectrum, or whatnot. So it's really muddying the waters on what neurodivergence really is here. So we're going to aim to really clarify that a bit more today. Being neurodivergent does not mean it's not synonymous with disability, pathology, or deficiency here. It's not something to fix or cure. And again, it's really to normalize because when we really think about it, who is really neurotypical and how they receive, process information for the necessary output. And then neurodivergence is really non-experienced or manifested the same regardless of diagnosis. So if you see one person with ADHD and how they process information and what they need in order to thrive, it's going to look very different from another individual with the exact same diagnosis. So we really have to understand on an individual level, what are the specific strengths and what are the supports that are really needed for this person to continue to thrive and shine. Why does this matter? This matters is when environments are really geared to focus on the neurotypical. Again, what does that really mean? But if environments don't flex, that means that a lot of people, unfortunately, get judged or labeled. For example, I've often heard in various work settings that I've been making hiring decisions when people are not giving an opportunity because they're not a culture fit. Also, in various leadership roles, I have also seen a lot of folks being labeled as, oh, they're underperforming, or they're difficult, or they're just unmotivated, or they're not really a team player. And unfortunately, these labels are quite pejorative. And what is conveyed to the individual that's being judged, obviously, it's not going to benefit them, help them thrive, and by default help the rest of the team thrive as well. So in summary, inclusive design benefits everyone, not just neurodivergent employees. So yeah, let's proceed. And this slide is really a summary of what I just said, right? So neurodivergence means it refers to natural variations in how people think, process information, regulate attention, and experience stress. Some of us might have heard of executive functioning skills. So that is the umbrella concept for all of these important skills in what we're thinking about when we're looking at neurodiversity. Neurodivergence is actually quite prevalent, just looking at the United States alone. So, about 15 million of folks are officially diagnosed with a neurodivergent condition. And so, the bulk of this does include ADHD and autism spectrum disorder. But again, remember that this is an umbrella concept. It's not just these two diagnoses, it's so much more. And also think about how many individuals don't get help, they don't get assessed. Part of it's for a multitude of reasons. So as you can see here, these are some of the conditions that are also included in this umbrella concept: sensory processing differences, learning disabilities to include dyslexia, and like I said earlier, some of the mental health conditions, including bipolar, PTSD, which is not included in this slide. So again, not to belabor the point further, neurodivergence really comes from a strengths-based perspective. It's not pathologizing or deficit driven. It's really just recognizing and reframing neurodiversity as merely a difference in cognitive and nervous system functioning that does interact strongly with our workplace environment. How is it set up? Is it psychologically safe? What is the leadership behavior that is supporting all types of processing and also change management? So the intensity of and the frequency of change that a lot of times is prevalent in a number of organizations. And very quickly, so I mentioned psychological safety. What is this? This is a concept that's been around for quite some time. A lot of us may be familiar with Amy Edmondson's work on psychological safety. But basically, psychological safety means that it's the belief that everyone, that the environment is safe for everyone to take interpersonal risk taking. And interpersonal risk taking means that we can speak up, that we can ask questions, we can have differences of opinions, we can report mistakes or propose new ideas, new divergent ideas without the fear of punishment, humiliation, retaliation, or retribution. Now, this seems so commonsensical to all of us here, but sadly, you just have to hop on LinkedIn every single day, and there will be some sort of post on what psychologically unsafe environments look like and how they are impacting the workplace in general. So specifically for the neurodivergent population, and I'm going to skip to the next one of these slides here, and then I'm going to backtrack a bit. So tying psychological safety and why is it all the more important for the neurodivergent population? So there is research, and some of which is summarized in the book, The Canary Code, that highlights that individuals that are on the spectrum and or have ADHD, they are really the first individuals to notice like something is really off here. So these individuals, there's something just about their processing and their nervous system that they're very attuned to capturing something is off, something just doesn't feel safe, something that doesn't feel inclusive. And so the whole metaphor about the canaries in the coal mine, if many of us know this, having these cute little birds in the coal mine to be the first, right, living creature to say, hey, something is happening here. We need to clear out before it gets even more dangerous and actually causes loss of life. So at any rate, just tying the whole neurodivergence piece and why psychologically unsafe spaces, how it impacts anyone in general. But one of the strengths with the neurodiverse population is that they're the canary in the workplace. They're noticing very early on before anyone actually can put it into words. What is actually going here that's getting in the way of goals and communication and productivity and retention and so forth. So I'll come back to this slide in a moment, but I wanted to tie this slide with the Canary Code. And the last piece in this slide is to really highlight that a workplace that is psychologically safe is designed to address everyone's neurodivergence and neurotypicality. So it really has us think about, are we communicating in multiple ways that really reaches everyone on our team and in our workplace environment? How are we managing questions, dissentment, curiosity, as opposed to making assumptions about a person being difficult? Are we really designing meetings to maximize how everyone is able to absorb and retain information? Are we providing spaces and normalizing some time that people might actually need in order to calm their nervous system down? And are we also thinking about that not everyone likes to chat in the coffee room or at the water cooler? Are we thinking about how retreats and, yeah, intense discussions and meetings and powwows, how they may not be readily received by everyone, and it has nothing to do with their personality, but it's literally about how is their nervous system responding and reacting. All right, and Emily, this is you.
Mhm. Great. There's two concepts that we are advancing in doing this webinar. The first one is inclusive design, otherwise known as universal basic design. And what this means is when we design not only a physical space, but an emotional experience or any kind of experience at all, we need to keep in mind universal principles so that the design of it works for most people. And so, what principles we often use is we're designing for the greatest need because that person would otherwise be excluded. So, I'm not an expert in universal basic design, but there are some core principles that we use, such as making sure that from like a sensory perspective, that what is the lighting like, what is the temperature, we are designing for intuitive and ease? And are we putting a cognitive load on somebody by making them try to figure out too many things? What are we doing with the size and the space of a room? Or in a digital space, what does this feel like? Is it so many people that no one wants to speak or turn a camera on? So it's really understanding how we're setting up an environment and an experience and designing it in a way that makes it easy, inclusive, and effective for an organization. As we do know, we have to understand the organization's needs and demands too, as those need to be balanced in this design process. Because again, it's a universal basic design, which means those financial needs of an organization and the need to have some standardization, those are core design principles as well. And so we like to explain this to show that there are so many perspectives and people to accommodate that this can be very challenging for organizations, but it's especially important in this idea of the Canary Code, where we have people who are neurodivergent that can be more sensitive in one of these areas. And research shows that we are statistically more perceptive to certain areas, and designing for that will actually benefit everyone. The second framework that we're advancing, and Mirna, I'm looking for the slide where it's kind of a placeholder for feedback about the self-audit tool. Thank you. Is I'm going to start taking feedback about the self-audit tool. And the reason why is the second framework that we're advancing is something called human-centered design. In this practice, what we do is we start to identify the people who are impacted by a design or experience or physical space. And we start to identify their needs, the pain point, what the process is running through. They could be producing those emotions or producing that experience. And then underneath that, we start to understand what are the opportunities for improvement. By using these two frameworks together, what we're doing is trying to understand for the neurotypical community and trying to collaborate and work with the neurodivergent community in a way to improve the universal basic design so that we can proactively identify solutions, workarounds, changes to initiatives, or changes to workflow or processes, things that are preventive and forward thinking, because this prevents harm and also, again, designs for the most intense or more complex needs and it will bring up everyone. And so this is our way of also accommodating an organization's needs. So from this point, I'm assuming everyone's been able to take the self audit tool.
And I agree 100% with what you're saying. And I do think that sometimes a lot more burden falls on HR than they should really have to shoulder. I think, though, if we don't train our people so that they each can operate independently and realize why those smoke detectors need to work, then that won't stop. And that's what we're seeing right now. And I've never worked for a place where HR was big. Normally there are a lot of people trying to do good work, and they have a lot of work to do because the entire organization depends on them. And so my dream job would be that we actually spend the time to truly train all of our leaders, period, any level, every level, why we need to be inclusive. And we also roll that out to other employees, because sometimes the manager understands, but they can't convey everything to their team on why we need to do it in an inclusive way for any group. And the more understanding we can promote and the more accountability we have when it isn't done, the better our organization will be, because we may give a course or one or two courses to people, and then if we don't hold them accountable for what they were supposed to learn, and we see that's not happening, and we just let that go because they may be star performers, then we're back to square one. And that diminishes the psychological safety that Mina talked about. It's a whole strategy that's necessary. It's not a one-off.
Thank you.
Thank you. For purposes of time, let's keep moving. Myrna, if we can treat more 13 and 14 as resources, if you want to just do a quick voiceover on them, and then we can probably get to the mural board.
Yeah, absolutely. These
Go ahead, Zoe.
slides, there's definitely a lot of information on these slides. And so you will get a copy of this recording after the webinar is completed, so you could take a closer look at it. So this is really a summary of the entire Canary Code book. And by the way, the Canary Code, I met the author in San Diego over the summer during a coaching conference. I had never heard of the Canary Code. And so the name itself caught my eye. I attended her presentation and I was all in, and I have a book on my desk and I see it every day and I flip through it every day. So basically, this is talking about inclusive design for all brains at every step of the way, including recruiting and hiring, taking a look at how are we even advertising our positions? Is it templated, or is it really thoughtful to really invite, as many different types of thinkers, which in the end will ultimately benefit the entire organization, regardless of the industry that we're in. We're also taking a look at what the pre-boarding and onboarding experience. How are we relaying information? Is it all cookie cutter, or is there an opportunity to convey it in different modalities? When does it need to be live? When does it need to be recordings? How are the recordings spaced out? Are we giving people 3 hours worth of information, or is it module based? So snack size bites for people to really retain and reflect on the information. So as you see here, this is a model that's really looking at how are we making these decisions to include everyone's brains, for lack of a better way of putting it, including for folks that are leaving the organization. What does transition management look like, aka offboarding? So even in the offboarding process, how are we doing it in a thoughtful, inclusive, and safe way? And then this next very busy slide, oh my goodness. Yes, a lot of information. So this is just how neurodiversity can show up in the workplace in various stages of the onboarding, performance management, transition management phase here. So again, you will have this video and then you could take a much closer look at this slide as well. And I believe the next is looking at the mural board.
Yep. Oh, do you want us to go back to that slide really quick? I'm just going to talk to it
Okay.
just for helping people navigate it. I know we're running up close to time. And so if anyone is not in the mural board, you can also drop your comment into the chat mural board for you. But this is what you'll see. Pages, the recruiting up and going across in the columns is recruiting, onboarding, performing, transitioning, and championing. And those emojis in the third row are just summarizing kind of the actions and the steps that's happening, which most of us know in an organization. And then I highlighted the needs and pain points going down, with the green being a need and the pink being a pain point. That emotional experience showed by the emojis, the different touch points and kind of process things that are happening is in the orange. And then I really summarized some of these that matter, or the specific experience in
And Emily, you're breaking up again, so shut off your video.
take us over to the mural board, just because I know we're super tight on time. A couple of you who are in here, please go ahead and just grab a few post-it notes. If you move down to the lowest part of the section where there's some blank post-it notes here, you can fill out just thoughts that come up, like, how's my organization doing? Where do we feel like there's budget and support? And you can even just type in reactions to, oh, this feels like it would be very achievable and I could do something like this. And so one thing that I'll call out is in performing. We've talked about managers not always knowing how to be inclusive. And if you think about, how are we incentivizing managers to reward or incentivize performance? And so that's something that could be really helpful, is lack or too aggressive of feedback. That's something that can be really painful. And so those moments that matter, where we're maybe trying to focus some structure, is like that first performance review. The first time you make a mistake is in here. These are the kinds of things that when you see it in the moments that matter, is a cue that might be somewhere to look, is there something in the self-audit tool that I saw that's speaking to me that I could bring to my organization? Or is there something that's missing? One thing, for example, is maybe it's coaching. As each manager needs to get trained in being a coach so that they can be more curious versus punitive in terms of how they respond. Dan, so I'm going to stop talking very briefly so that, does anyone have something right away that's coming up within recruiting or onboarding as how their organization is doing, or where there is an opportunity?
I can jump in
Just
just
a second.
with
Yeah.
recruiting. I think I've recently joined a new organization and I do this for a living, but it seems that when you're in a high growth mode, we'll talk to anyone who does this kind of work. And when somebody is just, listen, I'm not sure if I need a manager, a senior manager, director, I'll talk to anybody. But actually, if you're being equitable in your mindset, you need to be more clear. You need to have clarity around the accountability within the role. People need to know what level it is if they're internals and they want to move to that team. And that is a constant. It doesn't matter. The intention is good from the hiring manager to be inclusive, but I'm like, you're actually being exclusive when you don't have more detail and clarity. So that's just something recently I've run into with recruiting, where someone thinks they're being inclusive by saying, yeah, just apply. Whereas other mindsets don't think I can just figure it out when I get there. I need to know what it is I'm doing. And it takes certain canaries to be holding accountability across the team on something like that. So that's just one example that came to my mind quickly.
Yeah, thank you. I'll share my personal example for onboarding. I'm also a pretty sensitive person and really absorb a lot of more like strategic information and data. And so when I join an organization, the way I say it is I can see the warts of an organization immediately and they just spring up in front of me and it's very overwhelming. And so I have been told be less volatile, don't be emotional, talk less, don't ask questions. And those are the things that actually frighten me is not being able to ask questions to me is a culture of silence. It's a culture of yes, ma'am. I been taught in my life that is not a safe thing, as I do not feel organizations have been designed for me. So I know we're getting close to close, and so we'll send out these materials. And I encourage you to use that journey map with your team or even in yourself, reflecting on your own experience so that you can compare. Here's the experience, here are the processes, and then working with someone to really brainstorm. What has been identified in things like the Canary Code, and where are there suggestions and opportunities that we haven't seen? One example there is I believe that in onboarding, proactive communication about what the benefits are and having a confidential way to get information about accommodations, about disability policies should be a part of an onboarding process, but it is not. So that's an example of when you're going through this journey map and seeing the experience versus the solutions that have already been thought of, keep thinking of more. And we'll send a form out after this to get feedback from all of you. We really appreciate you. I know many of you have to drop, and I hope this was a helpful framework. And we'll be in touch sending out these slides and some feedback so that you can teach us how to be even more inclusive about doing these webinars. Thank you,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Thank you, everybody.